Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last unit of study. Here we are at Unit 4, Our Earth. And this video is an overview to the unit. So let's get started. I know you've seen me before, but just as a reminder, this is Melissa, and I am a consultant with the Boston Public Schools and have been collaborating with you all for a couple of years now, and really here as a support for you as you pilot this curriculum. You know, and I hope you know, that you can contact me anytime with any questions, and my email address is here for you just in case you need it. And I'm not joking, email me anytime. So we have been on this journey for this school year, going through these 4 units. We started out the year engaging in building a community. We moved into Unit 2, where we moved out of thinking of our own classroom community and started thinking about the animal community and their habitats. And then we moved into the unit of construction, where we thought about construction not only as buildings and construction vehicles, but also as a form and as a way of making things. And here we are at the last unit of study known as Our Earth. You will see as we continue this conversation that Our Earth really builds on the ideas that the children have engaged with throughout the school year. We circle back to our community with various entry points. We think about children not only as advocates for their peers or advocates for animals, but now advocates for our Earth. And we'll talk more about that. In construction, we learned about the engineering and design process, and we will build on that as another project unfolds in this last unit of study. I wanted to bring this quote to our group to really sort of think about children as advocates and caretakers. It's sort of hard to believe, or hard to think about a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old really being an advocate. But what we really want to keep in mind is our children are the biggest advocates for our Earth and our planet. And I'm sure many of you got into this field thinking about our children as the future. So Robert Swan offers this quote: "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." So we're really putting the onus on our children to really think about what they can do to persuade, to advocate for, to build sustainable systems. And our children can do it. These are big, big concepts. And I really do believe that if we give them the words and the knowledge, they can be huge advocates. So check this out, the image on the left. If you can't tell, it's a tree, obviously, created, of course, by our beautiful stuff. That's a trunk. You see it's labeled there. I'm sure you all noticed that what the tree is created from. So here in this unit, children will explore the natural world by investigating and, of course, researching the Earth's properties, focusing on its surface and planet life. And I kind of want us to lean into these 3 bullet points as we continue our conversation today. Really thinking about responsibility, sustainability, and stewardship for the environment. These three themes are going to continuously intertwine as we talk about the center activities and the read alouds, the writing that comes up in this unit. So our essential questions, big ideas, are there's a few listed here, and what comes to mind for me, what resonates for me as I just glance at these big ideas is really thinking about impact, right? And as caretakers of the earth, this is a big idea. People can create and participate in sustainable systems, right? We are the ones who create these sustainable systems, and we're the ones that can maintain them. Another big idea that resonates with me from this unit is that the natural world can improve our quality of life and inspire artistic expression. So, we thought a lot about this, I think, during the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic. I mean, how a walk, outside of nature can do so much for our children and for our own self-care. So, as we engage in and dissect these big ideas, the big unit question is the following. In what ways do people, animals, and plants depend on and impact the environment, right? So we're thinking about two different things. What ways do we depend on the environment? What ways do we in our everyday lives depend on the environment? And what ways do animals depend on our environment? And then in what ways do we impact the environment? So, as we engage, as the children engage in Unit 4, this is the question that we're going to keep coming back to every week with those unit question charts. So there are three sort of, phases that the unit sort of is organized in. The first is really, as you could see here through these read alouds, really thinking about seeds and plants and trees. So the children will, of course, there's a text from Gail Gibbons, and there's going to be conversations with children about what plants need to grow, what trees need to survive. There's going to be conversations stemming from the great kapok tree and the gift of the tree. How and why are trees so important to us? How and why are trees so important to our environment, to the animals, to the animal community? And in what ways can we sustain trees? In what ways can we make sure that we are not only taking from trees, but that we are maintaining and sustaining and supporting trees because they give us so much. You will, of course, during centers and these read alouds and in writing, be really thinking about these big concepts that relate to plants and seeds. So in centers and in STEM, children will be, of course, planting, right? They'll be planting and harvesting these small gardens, which are small, small group gardens. Of course, as we think about creating trees, we will be doing some painting, and the children will be doing some building of trees in the block area. You'll be so surprised to see what kinds of trees children build. One of the reasons why I love visiting classrooms during this time is to see the creations of plants and trees that children build in the block area. It's amazing. We want children to be thinking about both realistic trees and imaginary trees for inspiration. In dramatization, this unit, you will see a transformation of this space. And so we're going to really allow for drama to change over time. You'll notice that there's only one lesson plan for drama for the full 8 weeks of the unit, and you'll just be adding on to drama as you go. So children will dramatize gardening, and then they will dramatize harvesting what they grow in their gardens. And then you will transform and add on a kitchen to the dramatization. And of course, children will be cooking with the vegetables and the fruit that they harvested in drama. And then we're going to be pretending like we're composting. So you will notice that dramatization is different in this unit in that way. Here are just another examples, some more examples of planting, both in STEM and discovery. And then, of course, some inspirational artwork that's happening here. A child painting with watercolors, their version of this real tree here. So we move on from seeds and plants and trees to thinking about sustainability. Again, a big word for kindergartners. And again, we're not going to shy away from these big words, because we want children to be exposed to it. And you know that big words in this curriculum are not scary, right? We're going to keep using them and saying them and introducing them and use them in our conversations and discussions. So we want children to think about these sustainable systems and recycling, thinking about food production, water, thinking about composting. So within these texts, we see another Gail Gibbons text. Children go beyond just thinking about paper and plastic in recycling. They really, in this text, dissect the recycling process. And it's so interesting for children to go way beyond the recycling bins, right? We want children to dig deeper into what that means. In the text, a nonfiction text of Saving Water, we of course think about why water is important to our bodies and to our planet, and what we could do to sustain this very valuable resource. In City Green, we meet a character who is a huge caretaker of her space, of her neighborhood. We see this story unfold on there's a problem that she notices and a solution that she comes up with as a child, and how the community worked together to address this problem. And then in Rainbow Weaver, we meet a girl who just dreams of being a weaver. And she figures out a way to use materials and resources around her to weave something very beautiful. So as we use these texts, as the foundation of the content, we want to really lift up for children that sustainability is within our reach, right? Recycling is within our reach. Saving water, using less water, using water when we really need it, that's within our reach. And being able to give children those contexts that they could reach is really empowering. So of course, children in this phase of the unit are composting, right? So I encourage you to order those worms, right? And create a compost bin either inside your classroom or right outside your classroom, or if you have an area that's shared with other classrooms, to create a compost space that children can observe, can touch if they want to, can see visibly over time how food scraps break down in the compost, and what role the worms play. You'll see, in this, that children will write about their compost, right? Or write about these worms that are so interesting. This child in this photograph wrote, "The worm helps the flowers grow," right? And so, that type of connection with worms and compost and dirt and soil, and children, put these things together as they are feeling and touching the worms and the compost. I mentioned earlier that drama in this unit really, grows over time. So in this photograph, you see that the teacher set up a garden, right? And then she has there some gardening tools, which are what they're like these. Those are the plastic beach toys that she's using as gardening tools. And those are, the synthetic flowers that she's using for her garden. So there's so many ways to bring dramatization to life. And I encourage you to think about ways in which you can use your everyday materials in this space. Something else I want to point out in that photograph is that, you see the flowers sort of, those flowers that the kids made sort of on the back of that shelf, right? And then there's the garden on top of the brown butcher paper. If you don't have props, just like this teacher has some props, and she also encouraged the children to make their own props, right? If you don't have what you need in drama, use paper, use felt, use butcher paper, things that you have that children can create their own things that they would like to engage with and play with. The last phase of the unit is really supporting this idea of a caretaker. And here is where we sort of shift to this thinking that there's so many things that we can do to be a caretaker of our community and our planet. So we see, you will see in the unit that there are these texts, which are actually just PowerPoint slides that are offered on the website. And they're different Caretaker of Our Earth texts. So these are, quote unquote books that were written by Boston teachers, Boston community members, Boston professors, some of my colleagues from the department, just highlighting a caretaker that they know. And so this idea really sort of empowers children to think about, what are ways that my mom is a caretaker of the earth? What are ways that my teacher is a caretaker? And that really helps us to think about how anyone can be a caretaker by doing small things. We read a few of these texts during the read aloud portion. And then I encourage you to think about anyone in your classroom community, your school community, your town, who is a caretaker who you can bring into this conversation. In writing this unit, you will see that persuasive writing is the main form, the main genre that children explore. They take on the persuasive writing for 6 weeks out of the 8. The persuasive pieces that the children are thinking about are really about this caretaker idea, right? So, and when we think about persuasive, of course, we have to think about the audience. When we think about persuasive writing, we have to think about who it is we're trying to persuade. And of course, what are we trying to persuade that audience to do? So children will come up with one idea to persuade another class or another audience to do that is related to sustainability, related to taking care of the earth, taking care of the environment. In the writing, you'll see that, of course, you will explore some mentor texts that are persuasive. There will be some joint writing happening. Children will create posters. And then the final persuasive writing is writing a class letter. So that will all unfold during the writing portion of the curriculum. So here's one example of a persuasive piece that a class wrote to their principal about recycling, taking care of trees, and picking up trash. I'll give you a moment to read it. So Caretakers of Our Earth, I mentioned a few slides back that there is a library of quote unquote texts or books. They're all in the format of slides or PowerPoints. And you can download them as PowerPoint slides and you can print them out or leave them, if you have a projector or a laptop that you're using or an iPad, leave them as these slides and use them as you would any other text. But these are books that were written by, you'll see a variety of them, written by many community members in Boston, highlighting caretakers that they know. And the idea of a caretaker, someone who takes care of the earth, right? And I know that, when we think about the word caretaker of the earth, you might think about, oh my goodness, what do I do to take care of the earth? And there are so many things that you can do and that you are already doing, right? You are, of course, recycling. Many of you compost, but there's other things, right? You may not use as many bottles of water because you bring your own refillable water container to work. That's a way that you're a caretaker. You don't like to throw your wrappers on the ground after you eat. That's a caretaker, right? You put them in the garbage. You are someone who, when you're finished drinking your soda, you put it in the recycle bin. That's a caretaker of the earth. You are a teacher who utilizes recycled materials, beautiful stuff in your classroom. You reuse beautiful recycled materials. That is a way that you are a caretaker of the earth, right? And so when we're thinking about this, and as you go through the unit, think about ways that you are modeling this caretaker idea. And when you notice your children doing something, when you notice that your children are using recycled materials, when you notice that your children are using the front and the back of paper instead of, using paper and throwing it away, when you notice that your children are being very kind to insects and not stepping on them, that's another way they're a caretaker of the earth, right? When you notice that the children are watering their plants that they planted, that's a caretaker of the earth. When you notice that these things are happening, make these connections, verbally point them out, lift them up so children can see that the everyday things they are doing to be not just a good citizen of the classroom, or not to be just a good citizen of the your community, you're also a caretaker of the earth, and all these little things contribute to our earth being a more beautiful place. So there is, just like in Unit 3, there is a project here in this unit, in the Our Earth unit, and it's known as the Capstone. And I alluded to it earlier, and it's all about thinking about one practice to advocate for. And a lot of this work unfolds in writing, in the writing component. So, the writing lessons will take you through a process of identifying a practice and thinking about ways to advocate for and persuade an audience on this particular practice. And then the capstone also, in addition, unfolds during centers. So you will come up with a capstone center, right? Just like we did with Unit 3, there'll be a space within the classroom where children can work. And we want to really help children with materials and things that they will need. But in what way can we advocate for this particular practice so that children have different venues or different ways in which they're expressing their idea, right? Other than writing. So here is an example of a capstone that is offered by Miss Cable, Miss Layla Hijab Cable, over at Boston Public Schools. So she really documented their process and is kind enough to allow us to engage with her as we, kind of take a peek into her process and into her classroom. So of course, there's got to be a way to vote for a particular or decide on a particular practice. So here, after studying trees and reading some of these Caretaker of the Earth books, the class decides to advocate for recycling, right? And recycling in each classroom at their school. So on the photograph on the right, you can see that there are a lot of ideas, and recycling is the one that children are most interested in. Of course, they are drawing pictures to make posters and, using pastels, which were introduced in an earlier unit. And then you could see to the right here that one of the children wrote and drew what would happen if there was no recycling. What would happen if there was trash everywhere? He wrote, "It is dirty everywhere." In blocks, children create, build, make a model of a recycling plant to help others understand the recycling process. And of course, there's interviews. Children interviewed each other. So you could see, what do you do to take care of our Earth? What other ideas do you have for taking care of our Earth? How did you become interested in taking care of our Earth? So all kinds of questions that they're not asking just outsiders, but each other, their peers. Children modeled and, sort of thought about what would you do? How can these other classrooms advocate for recycling? So they made labels for their bins and put them in the hallway and use some of their props from dramatization to kind of think about composting. And then they wrote a letter, right? They wrote a letter to their school leaders to express their ideas, right? And these are their reasons, because it's a persuasive piece. The reasons for recycling in every classroom is 1, it saves trees, 2, for oxygen, and number 3, so soil will stay in place. Those are their reasons. And I love this line here. So the Earth won't become a dump. You know how strongly children feel about things. In the resources, there is a Capstone project guide, and you could find that on the website. But here is just spelled out visually for you, just a suggestion for how to unfold the capstone. And you'll see that, in the beginning stages of the unit, it will be very important to observe your children and document, what are the children interested in? What are they asking lots of questions about? What are they interested in learning more about? And these entry points will be really valuable as you decide on a capstone focus. In week 5, the suggestion is to select a focus. Week 6 is to think about how to communicate this focus. Do the children want to make a poem? Do they want to act out in a skit? Do they want to write a letter, make posters? So there are so many ways in which the children can advocate for their ideas. Of course, in the end, we want to in week 7 execute the plan. Week 8, we want to revise the plan if necessary. And of course, in any way possible, we want to present and celebrate. So as we are thinking about starting this last unit of study, just a few suggestions to get you started. First, you got to order the worms. And you got to do the compost, right? And I know some of you are excited about the idea of compost, and some of you are grossed out by the idea of compost. I know I'm a little bit grossed out by the idea of worms myself, but figure out a way to make it happen, right? So order them if you want to collaborate with your colleagues and make just one bin, or collaborate with your colleagues and make the bins together. Or order your worms with your science specialist if you have one, things like that. Just figure out how to make it happen. And if you have space outside, put the bin outside for the kids to explore them. Work with your colleagues to, again, make this unit yours. I know I always reiterate that you are taking a curriculum that was written in Boston and, executing it in your own context. So you'll see that the trees images, that the inspirational images, the plants, those are all images that were taken from Boston. Not to say that you don't have the same plants or trees in your area, and not to say that you cannot use those images. But I think it will be really helpful and impactful if you can find images and resources that are relevant to your own neighborhood. Right. So, for instance, the trash trucks, the garbage trucks, the compost trucks that come around your neighborhood, take a picture of them. Right. And so that their children are seeing images and the trash collectors that are in your neighborhood and not just in the city of Boston. If you have a tree that's really popular in your school, take a picture of it and put it in the block area so that children are seeing not just resources that are from other contexts, but they're going to see familiar ones. I mentioned this earlier too, but I want to reiterate that there are many activities that go on for several weeks, right? And so, the planting, of course, you're going to plant them make your mini gardens in the first couple of weeks, and you're going to just have to keep taking care of them, right, until they sprout. So it'll be at least, 4 weeks before you'll see something. But you won't see another lesson plan. But you'll keep in mind to keep them going during centers. Composting is another one. You'll see only one lesson plan, and you will be able, you start it out, get your worms in there, put some food scraps in there, but you won't see actual change for several weeks. As the educator and the, inspirer, you'll have to just keep reminding your children to check the compost, what do we need to do today to take care of our mini gardens? Do we need to water them? Things like that. Because once you do it in the first couple of weeks, we want to keep reminding children to come back to them, keep observing them, keep taking care of them. And drama, I mentioned this earlier, that there's only one lesson plan at the beginning of the weeks of the unit, but you will just have to keep adding to it and keep revisiting it as you go along. And that's it for this Unit 4 overview. I want to, of course, close with just highlighting just my deepest appreciation for you and the time, the effort that you've put into teaching this school year. I understand for some of you, this was your first year with the curriculum, and I understand completely how hard it is and how hard it was to start something new and make it your own. The amount of planning that went into it, and perhaps the amount of frustration and stress that you might have experienced this year, with the new curriculum. And of course, teaching through a pandemic. So I just want to, again, underline my appreciation for what you are doing. And just know that there's things about the curriculum that you will enjoy and your children have enjoyed. And as you are exiting this school year, think about what it is that you did really well and hone in on that. Because I know that there are many things that were successful for you this year. That's it for me. Contact me anytime you need anything, and we will be in touch very soon. Thank you and goodbye.